journey beyond imposter syndrome. This is where I invite you into a space where high achievers and spiritual leaders converge to redefine success and self-worth. By sharing transformative stories and engaging with thought leaders, this podcast serves as a roadmap for navigating the complexities of imposter syndrome. It's an intimate look into overcoming personal barriers tailored for those who value wisdom, leadership, and intuition in business and life. Join me at the Humble Warrior Podcast with Alani Bankhead. Welcome to the Humble Warrior Podcast. I'm your host, Alani Bankhead. And you guys, I'm so excited to have Nadine Rodriguez, owner of Applied Justice Solutions, with me today in the house. Now, do not let the kind of governmenty mundane name fool you. Nadine and her company are powerhouse, badass. I'm so excited to share their mission with you today because I think it's really important in creating more justice and more cohesive and connected and healed communities. And I can't wait to share her story with you. So Nadine, welcome to the Humble Warrior Podcast. Would you mind sharing with the audience a little bit about yourself?
Hey, yes, sure. I'm Nadine. I'm going to try to keep this short. I actually moved to the US 9 years ago as an international student from Germany. I was a social worker there, and it was just not what I wanted to do. I wanted to get my master's degree in criminal justice in the US because what better place to get a master's degree in criminal justice than the US? And I focused a big portion of my study on crime analytics because I love data and crime. So why not merge these two? And after I finished my degree, I followed my then boyfriend, now husband, crazy how these things go, to North Dakota, where he was stationed with the US Air Force at the time. And since I was still on a student visa, I was a little stubborn about the whole like getting married thing and whatnot. I needed to find a job within criminal justice. So I ended up being a corrections officer because that was really the only option I had over there. So I was a corrections officer in jail, and because the military moves you around all the time, I also worked as a prison behavioral health counselor in a medical maximum security prison. And I was a crime and intelligence analyst focused on gun and gang violence in local law enforcement. And while doing all that, I've always been working on the side pretty much since I graduated. Like I've been self-employed, working on small projects, mostly focused on like teaching and training, content development, and as well as program evaluation. And since fall 2020, I've also been an adjunct instructor at my alma mater. And in spring 2022, I decided to take a big leap of faith and move to self-employment as my main source of income. Some of it was because the frequent moving, just changing jobs all the time, it gets exhausting, it's frustrating, it's just annoying when you constantly have to start from the bottom. Criminal justice is not one of those fields that are that great because you have to build up your career to move up the ladder. For moving around, it's not that easy in that field and actually gain more better paying jobs and whatnot. And another reason was because I felt like I could better serve our communities as an external consultant than from within. So I founded Applied Justice Solutions, where I'm dedicated to fostering positive change for individuals and organizations in behavioral health and criminal justice fields. And I do that by helping clients to make the most of their resources and achieve meaningful results by focusing on how I call them the 3 pillars. That's program evaluation and development, data, and professional development. And I try to do all that while being trauma informed. Yeah. In my personal life, I'm also a wife. I'm a military spouse. I'm a mother to a toddler, and I'm also currently pregnant with twins. So it definitely never gets boring in our house.
Oh my gosh, there's so much amazingness to dig into there. And I am so excited to talk a little bit more about what you do. First and foremost, because obviously you and I know this, but for the audience who's not super well versed in the type of work that you do, you mentioned a term a couple of times, program evaluation. Would you mind explaining it to me like I'm five, what that means?
Yeah, sure. I'm gonna keep there's so much to it that I
Yes.
could be explaining and so many nuances that and details that I should be getting into if I was being like really correct about it. So I'm keeping it very like 5,000 feet overview. Essentially, we're talking about not always, but mainly, for example, grant funded programs. In my case, those would be like behavioral health and criminal justice type programs, like substance use prevention programs that are offered in prisons or like jail, or as well as in communities. Like I've worked on like trauma and poverty informed type of programs. And basically, what that is, the funder a lot of times just wants to make sure that their money is spent well. So they require a program evaluation, and even if they don't, it's something I definitely recommend doing, because the whole purpose of it is to find out if your process work the way they should, if you're really doing what you're intending to do. Like sometimes we just get in our heads and we don't do the things that we're intending to do. And also if like the outcomes and whatever you're achieving with your program is what you want to achieve, and if there are ways to do a better job or to improve what you're doing in order to achieve those goals. And that's essentially what it is. It's a lot of people say it's similar to applied research, which it is. Research, and especially applied research and program evaluation, use a lot of the same tools like focus groups, interviews, just data analysis and statistics and all that kind of stuff, but it is not exactly the same.
I got a C in statistics class, by the way. It is not. So everything that Nadine is talking about, you guys, is very technical, but it is so important. And I highlight my C at my bachelor's level statistics class because even though I'm not good at what Nadine does, I see its power so obviously. And so you guys heard her basically say it's a way to measure the outcomes and determine if a program is doing what it says it does. Now, why this is so groundbreaking and revolutionary and important is because coming from the justice field, and you can apply this to any other area of society, whether it's homelessness or food insecurity or whatever problem it is that you're solving. People are well intended. They want to do the right thing. Donors have money they want to give to these programs, or there's grant funding from the federal side. The government wants to make sure that they're getting the intended outcome. But oftentimes we go in with good intentions, but our methodologies maybe aren't the greatest. This is where data is critical. So I can't tell you how many times I have gone into a different jurisdiction where they want to combat child sex exploitation or trafficking or whatever it might be. And they're like, oh, all the tourists are like raping all of our kids or whatever it might be. And I'm like, oh, wow, that's so crazy. Can you show me the data that you have on that? And the answer is always, we don't have any. And so, starting from that point of, okay, we need to figure out a way to collect the data because that shows us where the problem is. Nadine actually takes it to another level in terms of analyzing that data, the befores and afters. And she's really great at honing in on these are the areas that were effective. This is where we might be able to make some adjustments. That way, you're not only getting the result and you have data to support it, but you're also just knowing that you made an impact, like knowing that you can measure what impact looks like is an incredible way to give feedback to the people who are doing the work. So, did I get that right, Nadine?
Yeah, pretty much. I think I often think about it like when I was a crime and intelligence analyst, that was pretty much what you just described. Like my job was to, in my case, like gun and gang violence, was to look at these type of cases and look for patterns and look what could be done. Yeah, look where the people usually committed their crimes, where you could usually find them, who was hanging out with who, all that kind of stuff. And program evaluation has a lot of that in it, that we use data to basically inform our decisions, just in a little bit of more like higher up than
Yes.
what I did as a crime analyst.
Yes. So what you're talking about is data collection and intelligence versus tactical.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I totally geek out on this stuff. And you guys who are in spaces where you want to serve your communities and help make the world a better place, if your eyes glossed over when we started talking about data, it shouldn't have. This is so much fun. And when you see the power of the work that Nadine does, it will just blow you away. So, another term that you mentioned was trauma informed. And just real quick for the audience, what that means is so when you experience trauma, like oftentimes trauma is the result of someone taking away your ability to do or not do something. So your autonomy and your power is taken away. Trauma informed, and I'm being very high level as well in my explanation, is training and methodology that we use to give that power and control and the healing journey back to the client, the victim, or the survivor by we structure questions and everything we do is geared around giving them choice back and supporting their healing journey rather than it being on the investigative side all about me just getting the facts and me as an investigator just being focused on my mission. So it's actually victim centered rather than investigation centered. And Nadine, I know this is a topic that's very near and dear to your heart. Would you mind sharing with me your why behind all of this work and why you're at the intersection of data and mental health and justice and all this stuff?
Like I said earlier, I just really always have been really interested with like crime and criminal justice. Like I was one of these people that geeked out on watching shows like Criminal Minds or like all that kind of stuff. I no longer do that. I cannot watch those shows anymore. I do not do true crime podcasts or anything like that. Please stay away from me with any of that.
Thank you.
I had enough of that. But I'm still very interested in criminal behavior. I'm still very interested in how people's minds work, how people's behavioral patterns work, and all that kind of stuff. It has a lot to do with neuroscience and our development. And yeah, it's just really interesting to me. And when I worked in the criminal justice system, I didn't realize it as much as I wished I would have. Especially, I have a bachelor's degree in social work. I've worked as a social worker in Germany. I should have known all these things about trauma and trauma-informed approaches, and I didn't. I've heard about it, but we didn't learn a ton about that in my bachelor's or my master's degree programs. And overall, it was just not, yeah, it was not very informative in that sense. And so when I worked in correctional facilities, especially, it was like, yeah, you could see the same things happening over and over again. Like a lot of rage, a lot of anger, a lot of behaviors that people would deem unacceptable. And then employees would react a certain way. Those people that were incarcerated would react a certain way. And it was like this whole spiral a lot of times. And then people, especially when I worked in county jail, I saw that a lot. People would get released, and a few weeks later, or maybe sometimes even a few days, they came back. And they got released and they came back. And they got released and they came back. And it's just a vicious cycle. And I loved sitting down with the individuals that were incarcerated whenever I had a chance and just had conversations with them. It was easier when I was a counselor because it was my job to sit down with them and have conversations with them. But I love to learn about their lives. And a lot, like the theme for a lot of these people was a lot of violence in their childhood, abuse, sexual abuse, physical abuse, mental abuse, you name it. They've witnessed a lot of domestic violence. They've witnessed loved ones being shot right in their front of their faces. Just a lot of things that happened to these people that then often they ended up taking drugs or selling them, or it was just this vicious cycle. And sometimes I would just sit there and be like, yeah, I absolutely understand why you ended up going the path that you did, because there's just so much that a person can take and then there's no more. And so to me, that was always, yeah, I don't know, it's just crazy how much trauma there is in these facilities. and in our communities in general. And I didn't realize that until I got out of working in the system and had to now face my own trauma that I faced while working in those systems. I was really messed up for a while. I had a lot of mental health issues, had a lot of issues stemming from that. Like my marriage was having a lot of troubles because of it. I was having a lot of troubles because of it. I was drinking way too much, like all these things. And then the therapist was like, man, yeah, all that trauma you experienced was a lot. And I was like, what do you mean? I just did my job. I don't know what you're talking about right now. Like, that was just part of the job, wasn't it? Because that's what people always tell you when you're in that field. It's part of the job. And then I started to learn more and more about it when I realized, yeah, it is trauma. And the way I look at it these days is most of us, if not all of us, experience an event in one point or more points of our lives that we could consider traumatic because it still impacts us long term. Like it has an impact on our mental well-being, maybe even our physical well-being. And there are just ways that you can learn how to cope with these things. And a lot of people don't know about these ways, but it's also if there's only so much a human being can take. And to me, it's important that, especially when people work in communities and criminal justice settings, and we're offering programs to individuals, that these programs are trauma informed because we have to assume, like I go in under the assumption that every single person has experienced some kind of trauma that is still affecting them, because I think it's better to go under that assumption than the other way around, thinking that no one has experienced trauma that affecting them. Because yeah, if I just expect that to be the case and then treat people accordingly, I'm not damaging anyone who is fine, who hasn't experienced trauma. So that's why I think it's so important. I'm not sure if I was able to bring that point
Oh,
across.
no, that was fantastic. And there's so much in there. Obviously, the audience can hear and feel your passion for this work. And first and foremost, that heart for prevention is one thing that really shines through of by sitting and listening to these stories, whether it's an inmate, whether it's a fellow corrections officer, whatever it might be, whether it's listening to my own story, I see the cycles and the patterns of these traumatic events, how they become cyclical in terms of you reliving it and then you're behaving in a way because you want to numb or escape it because you don't necessarily first know that you're experiencing a response to trauma, and B, you don't know how to heal it. And you, even with your background in social work and having all that training and education, you said yourself, I should have known. By the way, I'm allergic to the word should because that puts an expectation on us that is it's just too high, right? We're all human. But for you, what you're saying is I now know that back then I was experiencing trauma. I have language for it. I have a path to healing. Someone else validated my experience. And actually, I think the validation is another really important part because so much of being trauma informed is that very simple element of, oh, I know exactly what you're talking about, and you're not by yourself in that experience. And
Yeah.
so this is very parallel to, obviously, this is a podcast on imposter syndrome and self-doubt. But it's the same thing with imposter syndrome, right? You're in this corrections field, experiencing trauma, all the internal stuff, and most other people in your job are experiencing the same thing, but nobody talks about it. And I have shared in the past of when I first found out what imposter syndrome was, and I'm like, oh my gosh, this misery I've been carrying with me, you all have it too. Most of you have it, and we've never talked about this. Like, why are we not talking about it? And that for you, I know, kickstarted your journey to, of course, this makes sense. Trauma affects our behaviors. And no wonder my marriage was imploding and I was drinking too much. And by the way, that's a very common experience if you're in the justice field. I experienced that. My marriage almost imploded. I was leaning too much on the bottle as well. I feel like it's like most people. But of course, at the time, the high achievers that we are, we need to keep it all together. We can't show anybody our quote unquote flaws or whatever they might be. But the reality is that, of course, you're traumatized, even if it's your job. No human should sustain that level of sadness and pain, whether it's your life or you're hearing about it from someone else. And your whole comment about, I don't do true crime podcasts. Yes, queen, because I don't understand why people would want to spend time in trauma spaces like for fun. It's just mind-boggling to me. But anyway, so back to your very important work. So, out of curiosity, because you mentioned in your journey there was some frustration there, right? So maybe the path that you wanted wasn't ultimately the path that you ended up taking, whether it was struggles with being a military spouse, which, by the way, shout out to the military. Nadine and I connected. I forget exactly how we connected, but we are both military spouses in the justice field. Nadine has this incredible group on Facebook that supports spouses on that journey to get a solid, amazing career together. As you can see, she's a woman of many talents and giftings. And but being a health counselor and then doing your corrections officer thing and the data and all these things, it's very easy, especially for military spouses or people who frequently move, to feel like my career is this hodgepodge of jobs that don't all quite go together and stuff. But what would you say now, having the benefit of hindsight? What do you think now about your journey to getting to where you are now?
Looking back, for the longest time, I looked at myself as a big old failure. Like, I moved to the US as an international student. I got my master's degree. I graduated with a 4.0 in a country that was not my own country, in language that's not my native language. I thought that was a pretty cool accomplishment and that would open me doors. I was a little naive and maybe a little arrogant to think that was enough for me to be successful and whatnot. And then I ended up being a corrections officer. And I'm not saying that in a way of, oh, being a corrections officer is not a good thing. I have a lot of respect for the profession. I've always have, and I've always will. But it's a job. You don't need a master's degree for that. And I was like, why did I move to this country paying so much money for a degree and moving here and all that kind of stuff, leaving my family and doing something that I really didn't need to put myself through those 2 years of grad school for? And looking back now, that was like the single best thing that could have happened to me, quite frankly. I'm so glad I ended up in that job. Even though it caused a lot of mental health issues and whatnot, but even that was pretty much like, looking back, was great because it started that journey of me looking more into like trauma and trauma informed approaches. And now I'm starting to dive more into the neuroscience of it and what your brain actually does when it comes to trauma. So I'm really geeking out on this, as you can tell. But yeah, I've learned so much through that journey that I could have never learned if I wouldn't have went through that. I've gained so much experience, so many skills that I couldn't have gained otherwise. And I know so much more about the criminal justice system. I know so much more about our communities. I know so much more about what people's lives look like. Like growing up in Germany, I think I was a little bit too sheltered, a little bit too bubbled up. Not saying we don't have crime and all that in Germany. We absolutely do. But I grew up middle class, like lower middle class in Germany. Like we weren't rich or anything, but I never had to worry about food on my table or a bullet flying through my window or anything of that. Like I grew up absolutely oblivious of these things. Like I knew about gangs, obviously, once I was a teenager. You see them on TV and whatnot. But yeah, it's for some people, that's their reality from day one. They get born into this life and it's hard. So just me starting out my journey in this country like that, and also my professional career. I was a social worker before that, but which taught me a lot as well. But really just being within correctional facilities has taught me so much that yeah, I don't want to I don't want to miss that experience anymore. I'm very
Mm.
glad I did it.
Yes, yes. And it's funny because I am very similar to you, where earlier in my career, I really felt like it was just a hodgepodge of jobs and there was no real clarity. But now I can look back and say, oh no, that was totally obvious and very intended. And I use all the skills that I got from all those jobs in the work that I do today. And so now I can feel your heart for people and how much you love communities and wanting people to just be healthy and live normal lives, right? Normal lives where they're at peace and can move through the world, even though the world can be a hard place, right? But now, when you are doing work that is super aligned with who you are and your purpose, that's when we know your inner imposter is going to pop up. Would you mind sharing a little bit about your journey of your imposter syndrome, crazy roller coaster ride?
Can I go and blow my nose real quick? I'm
Oh, of
sorry.
course. Yeah, go blow it.
Yay.
Good.
I'm good.
All right, perfect. Okay, so let's start that one over again. Nadine, would you mind sharing with us a little bit of what your inner imposter looks like for you?
Yeah, so usually I would say, especially before I was working with you on coaching and whatnot, it was just a lot of limiting beliefs, a lot of I don't have enough experience, I'm not smart enough, I'm not good enough, why would anyone hire me? And especially like with that hodgepodge of resume, probably people think that I can't hold a job or that I must be an awful employee because I constantly change jobs. And it's just it kind of like now looking back, it all paints a picture and it all makes sense. But in the moment, I was like, this is crazy. Yeah, it doesn't make sense. And it doesn't like it looks weird to some people because like you just graduated with your master's degree and then you're going into a job that you could do with a high school diploma. Like, what do people think about that? So it was just a lot of wondering what people might think about me and
Yeah.
not thinking that I'm good enough to do these things or that I have to be older and more experienced to be a consultant because consultants are these old people.
Yeah. Yeah. Gray beards, like you must cross
So,
this age line in order to be a consultant. No, absolutely. Okay, so yes, cat's out of the bag. Nadine is one of my incredible clients. I love being able to walk alongside her and reflect back the amazingness that I know you guys are seeing in her, because I know you guys hear the same passion and love for the mission that I see from her. Out of curiosity, you have this beautiful ability now to be like, oh yeah, all that stuff needed to happen that way. And it all makes sense now. But at the time, you're like, even the corrections officer job after your master's degree, you said it was my only option. So you felt cornered in a lot of ways, and you're in survival mode. Just, okay, I got to make money. I have to get a job. I guess I'll take this corrections officer job. And then as you're continuing your journey, these thoughts of, I'm not good enough. I'm not experienced enough. What will people think? And I can't be a consultant kind of thing. When did you realize that what you were experiencing was imposter syndrome?
I'm not even sure about the exact moment or time, if I'm being honest.
Hmm.
I think it was like a gradual, like it just evolved. Like the more I went into journey of professional personal growth, I got to the point when I became self-employed where I was like, ooh, there's so much I need to learn. I have no clue about any of this stuff. I worked like projects on the side. So I already knew like 1099s and all these things, but there's so much more to self-employment being your main source of income. And then I kept catching myself. Basically all I did, or all I still do at this point, but now it's for different reasons, is I would subcontract. So I never went for my own projects. I rather subcontracted for other program evaluators that would hire me to do like small portions of their projects, a lot A lot of times, like the data analysis portion and data collection and whatnot, anything that had to do with data, since they knew I was good at that. But yeah, I always had this, oh yeah, I can't do that yet. I don't have enough
Mm.
experience. I don't have formal education in program evaluation. I didn't get my degree in program evaluation. I got it in criminal justice with a focus in crime analytics, which thankfully gave me a lot of, I had to attend PhD level statistics classes and all that kind of stuff, which quite frankly, in program evaluation, you do not need at all.
Oh,
Like
God,
at all.
that's torture. I can't imagine.
Yeah, that I loved it. For me, it was absolute joy. Our statistics professor was awesome. He made us, every time we learned like a new statistical method, we had to calculate it by hand first before we were allowed to use it in SPSS. So we would learn what exactly like the mechanisms behind it, and I absolutely loved that class. It crushed me, but I loved it. But you don't need, honestly, you don't need even that high level advanced statistics and program evaluation.
Okay, so I want to highlight what you mentioned about I am not smart enough and I don't have the proper education or credentials, or actually the top two imposter syndrome statements that I see across my practice. It doesn't matter where I am. Those are always number one and number two, where people say, I'm not qualified to do the work that I want to do because A, B, and C. Now, of course, you have to be qualified to do open heart surgery. You need those medical credentials, right? And so, out of curiosity, knowing what you know now, thinking back to that version of Nadine who was telling herself, like, you're not qualified, all those things, what would you tell that version of you now?
Obviously, there's always more to learn, and I'm a lifelong learner. I don't think I'll ever stop. I love learning and education and all that, but I absolutely did know what I needed to know to get started, and then just look for more resources whenever I got stuck, or lean on mentors and ask them questions. Like, I'm part of the American Evaluation Association, which is, by the way, like one of the most awesome like professional associations I've ever been part of. There's so many great people there that are they love to help new people, evaluators like me. One thing I learned these days is that the majority of program evaluators do not have formal education in program evaluation. They don't have a degree in program evaluation. They have a degree in many other things. Like one of my mentors, her degrees in community psychology. She did, I think she did some like courses here and there, maybe, but it wasn't really a thing until a few years ago that there are whole academic programs around program evaluation. It's just, yeah, because I also think I've been a research assistant in grad school. I've learned about statistics. I've done research with my professors. I was a crime and intelligence analyst. So I've learned a lot of the tools along the way that you use in program evaluation. I just had to add some more, for example, like theories and just how you do certain things. Like looking back, for example, my very first evaluation was very researchy. Like the report that I wrote after that was more like a research report, which these days I would no longer do it like that. So I think it's just a matter of, I already had all the knowledge I needed to get started. And now I learned more along the way, and I will continue to learn more along the way. And if I get stuck, I will ask someone. And I think that's honestly, that's how a lot of professions work. That
Yeah.
even a surgeon, if you think about it, they don't start out with doing surgery all by themselves right out of school. They might shadow someone and then they do it themselves, but someone with more experience is standing right next to them and
Yes.
that kind of stuff. Also,
Yes.
I don't know why we always expect ourselves to just know everything and do
Mhm.
everything perfectly from the beginning. And if we can't do it perfectly, then let's just not do it at all.
Yes.
It's, yeah.
Okay, that is a wonderful question, Nadine. What do you think that is? Or maybe in your own journey, what do you think happened? What interaction did you have, or what did somebody say to you when you were younger that led you to believe I have to be perfect right out the gate?
See, I don't even know if anyone ever said that to
Mm,
me. I'm not
Mm-hmm.
100% sure. I've always been, I would say, looking back, I've always been somewhat of a high achiever. My mom was actually rather the opposite. She was always like, man, why you got an A again? You didn't even study. How the heck do you always do that? Like, she rather scolded me for not studying. And then I still got or I had a B basically. And she was like, if you would have studied, you could have had an A because you're smart like that.
Oh
And
my gosh.
he was always trying to push me to actually put the effort in when as a teenager I was like, why should I can have a B for
Yeah.
doing nothing.
Right.
So I don't know if anyone ever told me that. I think it was rather something I put on myself. And especially like it same during my bachelor's degree. I was not an A student in my bachelor's degree yet, but I also don't think I put my whole into it. And then in grad school, that's when I started. I wanted to see where I can get if I actually gave it my all.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's just
And,
so.
and that's okay. I love the I don't know answer because it just tells us that there's subconscious thoughts that are or at least back then were dictating those behaviors. And maybe for you, it sounds like the answer is along the lines of, I put that on myself. I literally didn't have any example of someone talking down to me or anything. It was the opposite actually. But I set really high expectations on myself. And so you came to me out of curiosity, like, why did you come to me like to do the imposter syndrome coaching? I don't think we've ever talked about this.
Yeah, that's a great question. So I think I was getting at the point where I felt the need for I've just heard a lot of other people talk about it, and I was like, okay, there's something there there's an obstacle there that I don't know how to get around that holds me back from fulfilling or from using my whole potential in this self-employment journey. And I know that if I really like, I want to make sure my family is fine. I only work part-time because we have one, soon three children. So by choice, I only work part-time because that gives me the best like balance between my professional and my personal life. But in order to do that, I also then need to bring in enough money part-time. And I felt, yeah, that something was holding me back.
Mm-hmm.
And so I was looking for coaches, and you were the first that came to my mind because I don't think we have ever even talked like on video or anything. It was always like just comments on Facebook, like in my Facebook group for military spouses and criminal justice. And I always was like, man, Alani's fucking badass. I need to, I don't know, become friends with her because you know how you're like the average of the five people you surround yourself with the most, or whatever the saying is. So I was like, I was reaching out to you, and I think at that exact time, you actually took a hiatus from LinkedIn where I
Mm-hmm.
reached out to you. And you didn't respond to my message for a while. So I actually started looking for other coaches, but none of them are specialized in imposter syndrome. They were rather like business coaches, which was fine too, because at that point I didn't even know yet what I was looking for, what I was
Sure.
needing, and whatnot. I just knew the two of us have a great energy, and that you were someone who I wanted to work with, or at least, yeah, like affiliate with. I think that it's important to find these people that just have energy that feels good to you.
Yeah.
I know I'm getting a little woo-woo right now, but
I love
that's
it.
true.
Let's
That's how I
go.
am.
Let's go, honey.
But then you finally respond and you were like, oh, I'm so sorry. Of course I want to work with you. And I immediately like mailed the other coaches and was like, I'm sorry. Uh,
Immediately dumped them. Immediately dumped them.
yeah, I
Sorry,
canceled
guys.
like those initial meetings and whatnot. I was like, I'm sorry, I found someone else. I was like, heck yes, Alani. And that's basically, I don't think I consciously was looking for you because of, I was like, oh yeah, I'm struggling with imposter syndrome a lot. I need a coach that helps me with imposter syndrome. I think it was really rather that something had me drawn to you, and obviously for a reason. And then I read your book too and really liked what I was reading. It really spoke to me. And so I was like, okay, maybe this is the right journey. And it was.
Yeah. Yeah. So what you're highlighting is really important in terms of the connection and you following your intuition on what the right roadmap was for you. And that connection, it's not at all. That's how we should be living our lives is sometimes the intellect, you're a data person. Data is all intellect, right? It's all logic, and that is very powerful. But there's something to be said about that intuition, the spirit, like whatever you want to call it, that it's just it brings you that peace of knowing, no, this is the right decision for me, and maybe I can't explain why. That's just as powerful as the data in a lot of ways. And okay, and you're like, I wasn't necessarily looking for imposter syndrome coaching, but there was something about you and your story that I wanted to be because there were parts of that I needed to maybe learn how to flex a little bit better so that I could step into my true power and best life. So what did that journey look like for you?
Still think still an ongoing journey,
Of
obviously.
course, always.
I don't know if you ever fully recover from imposter syndrome. I'm not even sure. Like now it looks differently. Oh my gosh, how am I going to handle two newborns and a toddler and then at some point go back to work and all that kind of stuff. But for me, it was just a lot of working through some things like these limiting beliefs, but also some stuff that maybe from my childhood, from my past, that caused these things, like you alluded to earlier. I actually personally also saw a therapist at the same time to work on that kind of stuff as
Yes.
well, because I just felt the need to. And I really like that therapist that pointed out that trauma. So I keep going back to him. Thankfully, he sees clients like online these days since I've already moved away from the area.
Yeah.
But for me, that was basically, it wasn't just working with you, it was also working with a therapist. It was also listening to podcasts of maybe other coaches or other people that talk about similar topics. I'm a person, I always like to get as much information as possible, and then I piece together the pieces that work for me personally and just
Sounds like a data analyst thing to do.
really is. I just like to create my own thing. Just works, I don't like to be shoved into a mold
Right.
that someone else has poured for me. I just create my own.
Yes.
Yeah, that's basically what it was. It wasn't just one thing, or it isn't just one thing. It's still an ongoing thing. It's not as intense anymore as it was at the beginning because I feel like I've already learned a lot of things that I now can apply without
Mhm.
needing someone to hold my hand. So
Yeah. I'm hearing a theme pop up for you in terms of different areas of your life where your old mindset or operating system was constantly focused on the end result and seeing what you were lacking or what you thought you were lacking in order to achieve that end result. And now it sounds like the coaching therapy, like all this self-discovery journey that you've been on has helped you reframe first to realize that you were already equipped with everything you needed to start the journey. And that along the way, as you identified areas that needed maybe a little bit of support from external entities, that you could find those resources, whether they were mentors or coaches or therapists or whatever, to support you in incrementally getting to that place that you were seeking. And of course, it's constantly evolving. And of course, like you're mentioning, oh, I'm experiencing some imposter syndrome at the idea of going from one kid to three kids. And right, I don't know that it ever goes away. But that's the thing is for it can go away for a very small percentage of people. But for most people, especially if you are doing work that is very aligned with your life purpose, it's going to be evolutions and cycles of you're going to experience it when you're about to have a breakthrough. And it's about harnessing the inner imposter, right? Like digging into the gold nuggets that it's telling you are your weaknesses, because that's the thing that is actually your superpower. And then as you continue to grow, when you experience imposter syndrome again, that's when you are reminded, oh, this is important to me. And this is part of my life purpose. So the fact that you're like, I'm going to have more babies and I'm freaking out about it. Of course you are, because you are so family oriented. Like you are not the kind of person anymore who lives to work. You make work for your life goals. And you and your husband have been very intentional about identifying what your family values are and the things that you guys are working towards and making your jobs support that goal. Now, it's never easy, right? It's always there are challenges and things that pop up, but of course your imposter's coming up with these new babies because you are an amazing mom. And so the fact that you're like, oh my gosh, how am I going to make it all work? But so let's celebrate you for a second because again, the high achiever is we like to nitpick and be like, things are going good, but there's always like these kind of little things that maybe I want them to be going better. What were the results from coaching and therapy that just maybe surprised you or blew you away or made you grateful that you went on the journey?
So there's so much, honestly. It's been amazing. Like I've seen such a big shift. And it's yeah, I sometimes don't recognize myself. Like I used to struggle a lot with anxiety in grad school, and some of my jobs I even had panic attacks and stuff like that because I would put too much pressure on myself on being perfect and whatnot, and maybe wasn't able to achieve that, or a lot of times it was just expectations that were unrealistic. So I don't do that anymore. I've become so much more chill as a business owner, and I can even see it like with my child. Like whenever he's a toddler, he has tantrums whenever that happens, like how I handle those things. Or it's now like we're facing another move next year with the military, and just how I'm handling these things these days is so very different than what it used to be. Like I would be completely stressed out and drive myself insane. And it basically was this spiral that would go downwards. And if you wouldn't catch yourself fast enough, it was just, yeah, it was just a bottomless pit sometimes. And
Mm.
I would get in my emotions and be very impulsive and whatnot. And that has changed a lot. Like I'm a lot more calmer. I'm a lot more at peace. Gosh, I love that peace energy.
Yeah,
That's
peace
like
is a good one.
I just want to be in that energy all the time. Honestly, at this
Yes.
point, it's just yeah, I really long for that peace. I have a lot of there's a lot of chaos, there's a lot of stuff going on in our life, but I still feel that inner peace. For example, when I found out that we're having twins, I obviously freaked out because who would not? Like, I don't know many people who would be like, heck yeah. I'm like, oh my gosh, this is crazy. But the one thing that I really never did after that, I never stressed about my career. And before that, that would have been the first thing. It would have been, oh my God, how am I going to do that? I need to keep working so people don't think I'm like some kind of imposter because suddenly I'm taking a year off or whatever because I decided that's how long I want to take off this time. And people would be like, this is not acceptable in the US. You don't do that in the US. Maternity leave is 12 weeks if you're lucky, and then you go back to work or you become a stay-at-home mom, and neither of these options sound appealing to me. So it's just yeah. But before that, I would have freaked out about taking off that much time. I'd have been like, oh my God, how am I gonna get back? I finally gained momentum in my business this year. Like it's gotten so good, and now there's this break and I can't stop it. It's just how it is. And that's how I want it to be too. Like I said, I could just go back to work after 12 weeks but I don't want to. That's not, I became self-employed exactly for that reason. So I can balance family and work and do the things I love while also spending time with the people I love. So just not even stressing out about my career. That was the one thing that I realized, okay, I've gotten further in this journey of like self-growth and working on my imposter syndrome than I even thought I was. When dad did not, I did not freak out that, oh, I'm never gonna be successful.
Yes. Yeah. I remember when you messaged me to let me know what was happening. And so, first, I want to point out that as you were going through this list of, I have less anxiety and the panic attacks, and I'm handling this PCS. So PCS is permanent change of station. It just means the military is moving you from one place to another, which is stressful. It's stressful to remove your entire household to another state or country or whatever. But you also mentioned I've noticed a difference with my child and how I interact with my child. And so that highlights an important tenet of coaching and therapy as a whole, which is when you elevate one area of your life, you actually are elevating all the areas of your life. And so you have these beautiful kind of maybe unintended consequences of, oh my gosh, was I just patient with my kid? Like, way to go, mom of the year, right? This is amazing. And you also mentioned the peace. So you're like, I just want to live in peace. I just want to swim in it. Okay, I want to do a quick tangent because Nadine is referring to, so one of the tools that I use is the Energy Leadership Index. It's like an Enneagram, a Myers-Briggs, or like a DISC leadership assessment tool, except it measures your emotional output day to day and then when you're under stress. And so one of the things with Nadine, and Nadine is like very typical of the type of person I work with, where she actually leads with compassionate energy. So she wants to be of service to other people. So she wants to heal her community. She wants to use data to do this. She believes that if we get into the prevention space and can establish effective programs, less people are going to be in jail because we're healing their trauma before it becomes a problem for the community, right? And the problem with peace energy, or not peace, with compassionate energy is it's not that emotions are good or bad, even though society likes to say it. They have advantages and disadvantages. And so the disadvantage to compassionate energy, which is constantly giving, is you end up depleted, which is where the anxiety comes in, which is where the panic attacks come in and the burnout and all that stuff. And so I love taking someone like Nadine and showing them. So one level up is peace emotional output, which the core thought around that, it isn't just about giving. It's we're all going to win from this situation or we're just not going to play this game. And I know that I think I told you, I was like, the second you get a taste of what peace, the outcomes are, you're never going to want to go back to just depleting yourself, even though there's a time and a place for that. And so I love hearing how much you love being in peace of, no, I want to win. I see my value, right? That thought of I'm not qualified and I don't have the education. Those are gone, those limiting beliefs. And now it's, no, I know my value. I know my worth and I deserve to have peace and joy in my life too. And you've worked so hard to undo those old frameworks and embrace this new system of beliefs. And it looks beautiful on you, girl. And even you talked about financial success. So you were like, the business outcomes I finally started getting momentum. I finally got around that block that I was experiencing. And what was it? Did you quadruple your rate or was it 4 or 5 times, something like that?
It was pretty much double.
Yeah, there you go.
My hourly rate.
Your
Yeah,
hourly
but
rate. Yeah.
I pretty much made it within the first 6 months of the year to earn almost as much working like 15 to 20 hours a week as I did in two of my full-time jobs.
Oh my gosh.
So I think if I would have kept going this year, I would have basically earned more working part-time than I would have in any of my full-time jobs before. Just now, obviously, I had to slow down because pregnancy and
Of course.
what babies. But
Of course.
yeah, that was the path I was on. And yeah, that felt really good.
Right?
And I know I can do it again. That's where I am at this point. I'm like, I've done it before. I will do it again once I'm ready to go back to work. That's not the issue anymore.
Right.
I like we always talk about success and whatnot. And I definitely measure, I'm a data person. I love numbers. So I definitely measure success in terms of numbers. I used to even measure it as in terms of how many hours a week I would be working. And sometimes there were crazy work weeks, especially working in jail, 12-hour shift. You can get a lot of hours in. But I no longer measure in how much I work. It's rather like the opposite. It's like how little can I work and still make good money? Like,
Yes.
and take care of my family,
Yes. I'm
Like-
sorry. I'm going to interrupt. I'm so sorry because I love that so much. What you just said of Tell me if I'm wrong, but it sounds like you were like, this is fun. This is a fun game of how much can I work to support my family, and what game do I need to play in order to have my rates in a place where I can thrive as a family, really itch that professional scratch in doing work that I love and get paid my value.
Yeah, exactly. So it's basically, I measure success just very differently these days. Obviously, I could make a lot more money if I was working 40 to 60 hours a week, which is fine, but that's not my definition of success anymore. Money is, yes, I do find it successful that I'm able to match like my full-time salary
Of
working
course.
part-time, but at the same time, the one of the reasons why I became self-employed was so I could balance being a mom and military spouse more with my passion of my work. I wanted to give up neither one of these, so I needed to find a way to make it work. And for me, working part-time, that was the way to make it work. And being self-employed on top of that, like I have so much flexibility, and that's how I measure success these days. Like being able to just be there when my child is sick, being able to not, unfortunately, there's no sick leave these days. So when I'm sick, I'm usually still working, but a lot of times I'll be working from my bed.
Yeah.
Like I'll be in my pajamas in my bed with my laptop on my knees and just working. It's not, yeah, I don't beat myself up, but
Yes.
if there's a due date that I have to meet, then that's just how it is. But yeah, success just can look so different than just
Yeah.
these, I don't know if society imposes it on us or if it's ourselves, whatever it is, like this hustle culture of work and working hard. And I'm very much a fan of working hard and putting in the work and putting in the effort. I'm not advocating for being lazy and just trying to smooch by and whatnot, if you get what I'm saying. I love working hard, but I've also experienced what it does to my physical mental health and to my relationships when I completely burn myself out and when I completely immerse myself in my job and nothing else matters. It's not healthy. And I cannot function the way I want to, and I'm not happy the way I want to be. I'm not in this life to be miserable all the time. That's just not how I want to live. So, yeah, it's just giving me a great way to balance everything and still feel like I'm successful in
Yes.
what I'm doing.
Yes. And so, Nadine, there is someone out there who's listening to this and they're like, oh my gosh, this is me. Nadine is me. You mentioned earlier, you're like, when I came to coaching, there was some block I was experiencing, and maybe I couldn't fully articulate it, but I knew I had to figure a way to remove that. And it sounds like whatever that thing was, you removed it. So, to the person who is listening to your story, resonating with it, they're asking, what was the thing that you had to remove and how did you remove it? What would you tell this person?
I think it was really, like I said, it wasn't just one single thing. It was
Right.
to put in the work and the effort to work on myself and to also look inward. Don't just look at those, like in the beginning of my career, I would always like blame the military for constantly moving us and for making us live in places like North Dakota where there's just not that many jobs to be had. And like virtual, like remote working wasn't that big of a thing back then. So I would always like blame external or like the fact that I didn't have a US citizenship yet. Like I came here as an immigrant. I didn't have a US citizenship for many years. And in criminal justice, working without that is hard. But so I always blame these things, these external things. And yes, while they were part of some of the issues I encountered in my professional life, like I lost out on a lot of jobs because we were moving again or because they needed me to be a US citizen. It was also a lot of things that were inside of me, like these learned behaviors or these limiting beliefs and just yeah, just all these blockages that I put up myself. It's not like someone else put a blockage there. Yes, some doors will be closed. That's still the case for me. Even now that I have US citizenship, there is still jobs that I cannot do because I'm not willing to give up my other one. So some doors will always be closed for me. but maybe these doors are also just not meant to be open for me.
Mm-hmm.
You get what I'm saying? Like,
Mm-hmm.
I put so much pressure and so much force on going this certain path that I thought I had to go on. And that a lot of people told me, oh, this is what your resume needs to look like. Like, this is, you need this climbing the ladder, you need to have this progression in there and whatnot. This is what your career needs to look like for you to be successful. Otherwise, you're not going to be. And I put so much pressure and force on myself because of these things. And once I removed that pressure and force, and once I just put in the work and then saw, like, let it be. Just
Yes.
see what happens. Because once you just let it be and let the things progress like they should progress, everything will fall into place.
Absolutely. So, two big things for me that were just like speaking to my heart. One is the world did not change. You just changed how you reacted to it. So, the military moves, they haven't stopped. You have another one coming up, but your perspective and how you're responding to it has completely shifted. Now, does that mean that there have been times where maybe the army does something and it pisses you off? Of course, right? All the time. But the point is, from a bigger picture standpoint, you can say, oh, bless your heart, bro. Okay, you're being ridiculous, but your response is completely different because of the internal shifts that you've made and knowing that things are going to work out the way that they're supposed to. I know this because I have evidence of this. I've been in a place where I tried to force a particular outcome and things were going to happen the way they needed to. And even though that closed door back then upset me, now I see that actually this was the way. And I'm glad that it turned out this way. The other thing you mentioned is my resume needs to look a certain way. That comes up so much with people that I work with of there are these very heart-centered people. So whether it's like homelessness or human trafficking or trauma or whatever, mental health stuff, they want to get to a place where they can have that influence and create that change. And very well-intended mentors or other people in the space will be like, oh, but you don't have this, or like your career progression needs to look a certain way. And a big theme that I see with these amazing humans that I get to work with is I'm going to make it my own way and I'm going to kick the door in. Maybe you try to follow that guidance, but your intuition's just so strong at some point, it's just going to override that. Actually, that's not going to work for me. And I understand that's the standard path, but I'm going to make my own path. And it's hard to make your own path, right? Because it's never been done before. But this is where, for Nadine, especially, like Nadine is a visionary. What we've been talking about is Nadine sees what the future could look like in terms of communities that have less incarceration rates, more healed individuals, like less overcrowding in the prison system, or whatever the social issue might be. She sees what's possible and she's building the solution that society doesn't have. That's what a visionary is. And not everybody in the crowd is going to be a visionary. It's a very small percentage of people, but it can be very lonely in that space of I'm blazing my own path, but I know that what I'm doing is right. And I know that the outcome that we're going to get to is going to create change that people didn't really realize they needed. To you and I, it's no brainer, right? Of course, not having food on the table might lead somebody to dealing drugs, right? Because they need to make money and this seems like an easy way, right? We're not excusing the behavior, but we understand the genesis of it. And all that to say, it's so much fun to see you just be yourself and be at peace and have that joy and not be phased at all. Like when some of these life events popped up and you sent me notes about them, you're just like, yeah, man, it's cool. And I'm like, oh, okay. This is a very different Nadine from day one of us working together. And okay, let's talk for a second about flow state and like when you're just in your joy space and things are like aligning and can you share with the group? So flow state, I define it as like a runner's high, if that's like an easy way of saying it, where something that supposedly should be hard is actually like very simple and you're firing on all cylinders and you feel like you could do it forever and time passes by really fast. So have you ever experienced flow state?
Yeah, definitely. And I think more so since I became self-employed and started walking the path I think I'm meant to be walking, it's been a lot more times that I've experienced it.
Oh, I love that. And can you share an example of a time? It doesn't have to be anything crazy, just like one example.
Okay, one example, I guess I'm telling something now. So a few years ago, I've always been wanting to write a book. And a few years ago, I started doing it and it was painful. It wasn't fun. And I would look at the clock and be like, ooh, I only wrote for 30 minutes. It felt like hours. And then I stopped because it was really not that much fun. But it never stopped that I really wanted to write and publish a book. I started the beginning of this year, pretty much almost at the same time when I started working with you. I started writing again and writing a book. And suddenly it was so easy. And now I'm like writing for 1, 2, 3 hours and it feels no time flew by. Like I could write forever. And that's how I know like I'm doing the thing that I really enjoy doing. Like for me, flow state, to reach flow state is basically the easiest whenever I do things that I'm really passionate about, but also when I do things that are meant to be in that moment for me to do. And
Yes.
but I have to be like in a like my physical mental health have to be good as well. So I've just been putting so much effort, not like we've been talking about personal growth and professional growth and whatnot. Like I've been putting so much effort on taking better care of myself, like nutrition, and obviously I'm not very like fit and active right now. I have some restrictions in my pregnancy, but I'm still going for walks and nature and fresh air and all these things that I know nurture my mental health. If I have all this in place, then flow state is just, yeah, it's gonna be there.
Yes. Oh my gosh. I love that. So again, moving away from the achievement goal of I have to work out, I have to be fit, to I'm moving my body in a loving way that nourishes me and all of me,
Yeah.
right? So having that foundation of my body being as healthy as possible primes you for flow state to just come. Girl, the funny thing is these are all things that hello, Captain Obvious, like people should know. But I know, and almost everybody that I work with has a similar experience where because you're constantly in service and in compassion mode and wanting to give to others, you sacrifice your well-being
Yeah.
to support the group. But when you get to that point of understanding, I can give more if I am healthy and I put my oxygen mask on first. And it's a process to get there, but you've made it. And so thank you so much for sharing that really important element of when I'm at my best, then everybody around me is happier and that flow state comes. And so guys, Nadine definitely needs to finish writing this book. And I know that she will. I have no doubt whatsoever. But I'm so excited for her to share that because, as I'm sure you can hear, she's incredibly inspiring and her work is really important. I'm always yelling at her that the world needs this specific gift very desperately. And it's beautiful. Last question for you. Can you share a memory from childhood or sometime in your past that you felt was like a harbinger of your current career and work? So something that maybe back then you were like, this is a weird memory to have. And now you're like, oh, that was pointing me to my purpose.
Okay, so this is really odd now. I have this one memory, and I really am not 100% sure if I dreamed of it or if it really happened. But I do have that one memory of myself, and I still see it in my inner eye, like in fifth grade in Germany is when we start learning English earlier than that, like in elementary school, but fifth grade is pretty much when you start learning it more seriously. And I have that memory of myself where I sit in English class, and English class in Germany is not like the US so much. Like we do literature and all that, but it's more about learning language. And I was sitting in class and we learned about the United States, and I was like turning to my friend and I was like, oh, by the way, when I'm a grown up, I'm gonna live there. I really, it's so crazy sometimes when I think about that. Like I said, I don't know if I dreamed that back then or if it really happened. I have no idea. And then the other thing is very funny. So at the end of high school, we have to write a term paper, basically. And it's this long paper. It was 15 pages and it was so long. These days, I'm like, yeah, whatever, 15 pages. That's nothing. And I chose the topic in English class again, because English class was one of my favorite classes. I chose the topic of writing about the corrupt American criminal justice system in the books of John Grisham. And so hilarious.
Stop it. Oh
Yes,
my
I
gosh.
still have that paper. I'm not going to share it because it's awful.
Oh
But
my gosh. It
that
just
was the
gave me
topic.
goose, right? So I love asking that question because this is a theme where people have these dreams, non-dreams, like thought, like you have these experiences in your past that you're like, that's weird. But when you look back now, all those decades literally later, and you're like, oh my gosh, that's crazy how that worked out. So thank you so much for sharing. Nadine, thank you so much for being here with me today. What parting message would you like to share with this incredible audience?
I think just that it's worth doing hard things, like to stop shying away from that. When people tell you, oh, you can't do this, you can't do that, it's too hard, just try it. Like, what's the pain if you fail? Like, I regret most of the things I regret in my life were things I didn't do that I wanted to do, and not the things I did do and then did not accomplish. Just do it. Do the hard things. Do the things that people say, oh, you're crazy. This is never going to work. Or you're crazy. You're like, what is this? Just try it. And if it doesn't work out, it doesn't work out. At least you tried.
Oh, I love that so much. Thank you for sharing that wisdom. And so, Nadine, where can people find you if they want to message you and harass you about publishing that book?
I have a LinkedIn, just my name, Nadine Rodriguez. And you probably see up popping up like applied justice solution and criminal justice and all that stuff. And then it's the right person. And my company also has a website, appliedjust.com, where there is like a contact form as well if people wanna send me a message. And yeah, we've mentioned the military spouses in criminal justice Facebook group. So if there are any military spouses listening to this that work or want to work in criminal justice, just join us there. And those are the spaces that most people can
Yes.
mostly find me.
Yes, it is an incredible forum of mutual support. We have everybody, not we, you have everybody in there from FBI to NCIS to corporate like Target, justice system professional, like Target as in like the company, right? So all their security people and whatnot. They're always posting different job opportunities and encouraging people because it can be super hard to get your foot in the door. So we will put all of those links in the show notes so you guys can reach out to Nadine. And thank you so much for joining us today, Nadine, and for sharing your passion for data and uplifting life and protecting our communities. My biggest takeaway is really that element of I don't know why I was constantly focusing on the outcome and feeling I was inadequate, but shifting that mindset of no, I have what I need right now to start, and I will get the rest of the tools that I need on the journey. That really jumped out at me, and I love so much that you share that. And guys, if you are looking for more resources, I also have a life purpose exercise freebie on my website, www.mightysparrowcoaching.com. It even has video prompts to help guide you. You can also check out my best-selling book, which Nadine referenced, The Least of Us, How Your Imposter Syndrome Points to Your Greatest Power, available at all major book retailers. I'm also super excited to host my end of year event, which this year will be focused on shifting money mindset. It's November 5th, 12th, and 19th from 7 to 8:30 p.m. Eastern Time, as well as Greenwich Mean Time for my European clients. Check out the link in our show notes. Until next time, humble warriors, please remember the world needs who you are made to be. Thank you so much for joining us today on this journey to discover how you can harness your inner imposter to work for you. If you enjoyed this episode and would like some help overcoming your imposter syndrome, check out the free life purpose exercise on my website and subscribe to my blog. If you already know what your life purpose is and are ready to crush or harness your imposter syndrome, then you're going to love my best-selling book, The Least of Us: How Your Weakness Points to Your Greatest Power, available on Amazon and all major book retailers. Or you can hit me up at alani@mightysparrowcoaching.com to discuss private coaching or corporate and government training. That's ALANI@mightysparrowcoaching.com. Listen, there's only ever been one you, and there will only ever be one you. And you have a specific gift to give that the world desperately needs. Don't let your self-doubt be the thing preventing you from living your most joyful and impactful life. Until next time, I'm always cheering you on.